Okay, let's go over some practical points for conducting your research. Once you've submitted material to the IRB board for review, there's some things you should be doing. You can't just rest on your laurels, so to speak. First thing, make sure that you are checking your email at least daily for approval updates. They're going to email you to say if you've been approved, improved with conditions, or if you need to modify something. If they send you something that says you require adjustments, right? It hasn't just been flat out approved, but it's either approved with some conditions or needs modification. Have a goal of fixing all of those things that they say need fixing within 24 hours of getting feedback. This might not always happen, but that to me is a reasonable expectation. That if they've given you feedback, you're going to address that as soon as you possibly can, because it's going to have to go back out to those same people for review. So it's delaying when you can start your project. If it's approved with conditions, you as the researcher should be able to make changes, sign the package, and submit that package without me, the instructor or research supervisor, giving any feedback, I think. On the other hand, if it's not an approved with conditions, but it's like a needs modification, in that case, everybody who's a member of the research team, I believe, has to sign it and before it gets submitted. So in that case, do like you did the first time you submitted the IRB. Sign it and then send me an email when you think, make the changes first, of course. Then sign it, meaning we think it's all done, and then email me that you think it's ready to resubmit, and I will review it, sign it, and submit it. Use that wait time to prepare. It's not uncommon for it to take at least a week before your package gets through all of the reviewers. If it has been a full 7 days, contact me, either talk to me in class, stop by office hours, or shoot me an email and say, we submitted 7 days ago, and I will give a nudge. The goal is to have these done within 7 days, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't have a reviewer who just, it slipped their mind, or they didn't see it in their email. So what I can do is I can reach out to the person who puts together all these IRB packages and sends them to reviewers and say, hey, it's been 7 days. We're just checking in, making sure it didn't fall through the cracks. But in that 7 days, or however long it ends up taking to get these reviewed, you should be using that wait time to prepare. First thing, if you're doing an online study in any form, you should be getting your study already entered into, whether you're using something like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms. Do it now. Yes, they may suggest a tweak to a question wording or something like that, but you would still have 95% of it done, and then you can always go into it and modify it. So be putting your survey into whatever online hosting site you're using so that you're ready to launch it as soon as you have approval. If you're doing an online survey, that consent form page, you always have to have some kind of checkbox that says, by checking this box, I verify that I am at least 18 years of age or older. I've read this consent statement, and I am consenting to participate in this research, or however you word it. It has to have a checkbox that without being checked, you can't go forward into the research. So make sure it's working the way it's supposed to work, right? Now, some reviewers, by the way, might require seeing your functioning online survey in order to give approval. So it's another reason to make sure that you're pulling this together while you wait. Otherwise, you're going to have to get it all pulled together before you can give it to the reviewers, before they can say yes or no, your research is good to go. So this should be done. Like this, you should be working on this as you're going. If you're going to be using Sona at all, either because you're doing an online survey and participants will go into Sona to get access to your survey, or because you're going to be doing in-person in the classroom studies. There are some professors who are going to want you, the researcher, to give credit for everyone who was in that classroom through Sona. Or if you're going to be doing one-on-one appointments that people can sign up for through Sona, well, you're probably going to be using Sona, odds are, for your study. So if you're using it, and you probably are, you could start creating your Sona entry now while you're waiting for IRB approval. We don't want to launch it right now because our study hasn't been approved, But review that Sona guide, which is in Blackboard. Make sure you know how to use Sona. Make sure you can sign in, right? That you're in the system. You're in the system as a researcher. If not, let me know. That's something that we can have Dr. Boomer take care of. He's our Sona person. So that you're sure it'll only take a few minutes to launch it when approved. You might even be able to start putting together your Sona entry and just not launch it. I think that would be smart, so it's ready to go. If you're collecting data in the classrooms or you're asking to go into a classroom to recruit for out-of-class participation, while you wait to hear back from the IRB is a perfect time to make a list of the instructor names and email addresses for the people you want to reach out to on campus. Make a list of when they have class sessions that you'd want to potentially use, and create a form email that you're going to be sending out to all of these people and have it be ready so that once you get approval, you can take 15 minutes and get all of these emails sent out. What should go in one of these emails? Let's talk about that for a moment. If you want to either recruit in a classroom, meaning I'm going to just show up for a few minutes and say, here's my study. Maybe I hand out papers that have a link to it if it's a QR code, if it's an online study, or tell them, here's the title of my study in Sona, whatever. Or if you want to actually collect data in their class session, you're going to want to request permission from faculty to do this. You can do it in person, but a lot of faculty members might prefer an email because then they have a paper trail of who's coming into their class and when, right? Make this a formal email. Introduce yourself. Give them your full name. If you've had them as a teacher for something, you might want to mention that. Or if you're in one of their current classes, you might want to mention that. And tell them what you want. You need to be clear. I'm hoping to come into your class to recruit for an online study I'm doing for senior thesis. Versus, I'm hoping I can come into your social psychology class for 15 minutes to conduct my study, right? Those are not the same request, so be clear what it is you want. It's a good idea to give some study basics. There are some faculty who will let you come in and conduct research in their class only if it's related to the course material. So for example, if you're doing a cognitive task, you might want to mention in an email to Dr. Adamopoulos that you'd love to collect data in his cognitive course and tell him, I'm doing a cognitive study. It's on this topic. Giving the study basics, we're talking a sentence or two. This is not super long. Faculty can always ask you more information if they'd like it. Whatever you're asking to do, whether it's to recruit or to collect data, how long is that going to take? Faculty need to know how much of their time they're giving up if they agree to something. And they might only have 5 minutes and not 15 minutes. So you want to be really clear how long this will take. When would you like to do it? This also includes like what class or classes. So if you're doing a study where you're only looking to use upper division courses or junior and senior level courses, you would say that. If you're open to use any of the courses that they're teaching this semester, you could say that. If you'd specifically like to come to their Thursday session of personality psych, you would say that. I think it's a good idea to give a bit of a range. So for example, if you were wanting to collect in Amy K. Cole's abnormal psych course, if you said we're hoping to collect data in your abnormal psych course, our research will take 15 minutes. Any of the next 3 class periods would work great. Or we're hoping to wrap up data within 2 weeks. So if you have a class session in the next 2 weeks that could work, please let us know. It's also not a bad idea to say, if that won't work, but a date after that would, please let me know and we'll see if it works for us, right? Because what if it would just be one more class period after that? You should know it's not a great idea to just say one class period time. If you send an email on Tuesday and say, I want to collect on Thursday, only because that faculty member, they might be giving a test or something, and you would have been better off saying any of your next 3 class sessions or something like that. That would be a good example of when. Let them know that they could contact you with questions, or again, if another time would work better, or if it would work for a different class, if that's a possibility, you can let them know that. Make sure they know how to get a hold of you. Typically, if you're sending an email, send it from your campus email, then they can just email you back at that same email address. Like, that would be fine. You should always thank them. Thank them for their time, thank them for their consideration, thank them for supporting research on campus, something like that. Make sure you're clear if you have any restrictions on which classes you would like to recruit in or which classes you'd like to collect data from. Again, like I said, if it's only open to general psychology students, you should say that. Plenty of faculty teach more than just general psych, so if you're only interested in that one class, like, be specific. If you're wondering, well, where could I even find the names of professors or find out when they're teaching things, what time, what location those classes are in, you can find that all in the current online catalog. So if you look up current courses for this semester, you can still see them. Of course, you're not trying to sign up for a class, but it'll show you who's teaching what. I would strongly recommend trying to recruit or have a data collection period from faculty who are not in the psych department. Psych department faculty get hit up a lot for this. And they only have so much class time they can give up. So on the other hand, if you reach out to faculty in other departments, this just might not come up very often. And they might be happy to have an excuse to have you come into their classroom for 15, 20 minutes and collect some data. It's 15, 20 minutes. They don't have to be teaching. So I think it's a really good idea to reach out outside of our department. Talk to other colleagues. Like, it doesn't even have to be a faculty member you've had a class with. That makes sense. I think it's a natural, like, if you took a class from someone and you did well, to say, like, hey, I really enjoyed your such and such class. I would love to work with you to do my study. But you can talk to other students and see if they have suggestions of maybe who to hit up, who to ask about this. The worst they could do is say no, right? So I think it makes sense to plan to contact maybe 5 or 10 people at a time. Yeah, I wouldn't be contacting more than 10 right on the first go, because if all 10 of them say yes, you're going to be doing a whole lot of data collection. So you might want to hit up maybe 5 people. But then within a few days, if you haven't heard back from them, you could give them another little nudge, and or you could reach out to the next 5. So having a list of a lot of faculty that you'd be willing to contact is a good idea. Now, once you have IRB approval, if you need hard copies of something, you will talk to Jeannie Elliott. This is our administrative assistant. She sits in the main psychology office. Talk to her if you need copies of research documents made. You're going to want to have these ready to go. So I would even maybe go through the trouble of making 1 copy even before I have approval. Would understand I might have to make adjustments, right? But if I want to at least see how it's laid out, just to make sure it looks good and I understand what I want it to look like when I'm done, I might be starting to do that before I've even gotten approval. Jeannie can make copies of your documents. You do not have to pay for them. You do not have to make them yourself. However, I would like you to bring her a completed hard copy sample so that she can see exactly how you want it put together. This includes telling her also if things need to be collated. So if you've got 3 pages of your research materials and they all need to be stapled together, bring them to her in the exact form you want them. What is on the first page? What's on the second page? Can we have things on back and front both? Is that a problem for any reason? If it needs to be printed on colored paper, if you have a study where it needs to be on green paper, let's make a copy that is on green paper so that's very clear, and put a little post-it note saying these need to be printed on green paper so it's very clear. She won't have any questions about that. Like I said, if something should already be organized and stapled, having a copy that's already been stapled, yes, she'll have to pull it apart, but at least we can see what it's supposed to look like in the end. If you don't do this, you might get a whole stack of things and you have to hand staple them yourselves. If something needs to be printed single-sided, you want to make sure that, again, your sample has stuff printed single-sided. Or if you have color images in your research materials, and so you need to have this printed in color, you want to make sure that's all very clear in your instructions to Jeannie. Make sure your research, by the way, if you're doing in-person data collection and you're in the classroom, make sure your research materials packet, whatever it is that you're collecting data on, that it has a blank page on the back if you're conducting research in the classroom. That is so that your participants can complete whatever questions they're answering, turn it over while they sit at their desk, and not have their neighbors see their answers when they're done. Even if you think this material is just not that sensitive, we still want to respect their privacy. So as they're completing whatever it is they've been working on, you want them to at least have the option to turn it over and have it sitting on their desk where whoever's sitting next to them can't see it. That means, again, it's a good idea to print out a sample so that you're sure that when you're done, the thing that they will be completing is not on the back page of a paper such that they don't have a blank back. If you had to, you could staple a blank piece of paper or create your packet so that there's one blank piece of paper on the back of your whole packet. Or you could format your packet so the typing is just a little smaller and it fits on one less sheet of paper or something like that. By the way, having Jeannie make copies for you, it can take a couple days. She has many things to do, not just print out papers for you. So I don't want anyone to be stopping by her desk and saying, hey, I need 50 copies of this and it needs to be done in an hour because I'm going to be going into a classroom or something like that. You need to give her a couple of days to get this done. If you'd like her to send you an email when it's done or something like that, give her your email, but make sure you're checking it regularly. Don't do this where you say, hey, email me when it's done, and you only check your email once every week or something like that. If you're in person, remember to print off double the number of consent forms if you're giving your participants one copy for them to sign for you and one copy to keep. So if you're trying to print out materials for 50 people, you would actually make 100 copies of the consent form, right? I would typically say start with 40 to 50 hard copies because you can always get Jeannie to make more if you need them, and we don't really want to waste hundreds of pieces of paper on something you don't need. However, if you'll be collecting data in a classroom, you may need more all at once because you don't want to run out mid-class. So when you're sending those emails to faculty, if they say yes, you can come and collect data during class, it's a good idea to ask them how many people are in the class so that you know how many copies of your research materials you'd need. Now, when I say 40 to 50 copies here, you might actually, if you have two different research conditions, you might get, say, 30 of each research condition printed out if there's, two different types of materials or something like that, so that you have enough, again, within a classroom. If you're doing it one-on-one in the lab, you don't necessarily have to have like a stack of 30 extras because you're not going to have 30 people all show up at once or something like that. It's more if you're doing it in a classroom setting. Okay, some more practical points. Let's just keep on going. If you're doing research in the lab, this is that one-on-one or small group. Here's a whole bunch of things to keep in mind. Sign up for research room and time slots and make yourself a list of what room and time slots you've got signed up for. You sign up for those in a hard copy book in our main psychology office. Any faculty member can help you see where this book is. So can Jeannie, our admin assistant. So as long as there's somebody in the office, you could be signing up for research rooms and time slots. And when you do that, make yourself a list of the rooms and times you've reserved because you're going to need to enter those into Sona so that participants can sign up. Other things, by the way, if you're going to be doing any data collection in the lab, bring work to do when you're running research because you will have no-shows, meaning people who signed up to be a part of your research and then just didn't show up. I think the best way to use that time is to try pulling people in. Like if there's somebody if you got some people who are in a lot, like in the student lounge, you can ask them, hey, I've got some time to do some research. Is anybody interested in participating? Or somebody walking down the hall, but I'd still also have some work to do. Best times to do lab data collection. So best times for scheduled appointments are kind of right after classes end, because people aren't going to necessarily come out of their way to come participate in your study if they don't need to be on campus. But if they just finished up a class and it's down the hall, they're more likely to say, "Oh yeah, I'll participate in your research." So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's kind of that 10 to 10:15 a.m., 11 to 11:15, 12 to 12:15, 1 to 1:15, and so on, right? It's kind of right after, if you had a 9:50 class, they can get here to this 10 o'clock appointment. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10:50 to 11:10 is good. 12:20 to, honestly, you can almost go up to 12:50 because it's lunchtime. 2:20 to 2:40, those are good times because they're right after class. And if you're trying to catch walk-ins, basically people who have not signed up for an appointment, best time to do that is when people are hanging out in the student lounge. They're most likely to be doing that over lunch break. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's typically noon to 1 or 11:50 to 1. And Tuesday, Thursday, it's that 12:15 to 1 o'clock time. So try and be thoughtful about appointment times. When are people around? When is the building busier? Scheduling appointment times at 4:30 in the afternoon. Not many people are necessarily on campus. If you're doing it in the lab, it's maybe not the best time. It's also a great idea to schedule to collect data in the lab at the same time that other people are collecting data. That way, if they have a participant who signed up to be with them, then they're already in the space. You can say, hey, do you want to hop over and come do my study too? And vice versa. You can kind of both be recruiting and then trade participants a little bit. You can use Sona to recruit participants for appointment times. So review that Sona guide on how to do that. You can also use Sona to record participation for walk-ins, but only if they're in a class that is using Sona. Not everybody is. So have a backup plan. If they come in and you can't find them in the Sona system, saying something like signing your name at the bottom of their debriefing form and saying, this can serve as proof of participation. You can talk to your professors to see if they take any extra credit participation or extra credit points for participating in research, and that proves that they were in research or something like that. When you're using Sona to recruit data appointments, set a deadline for when people need to sign up to participate. Meaning, if you're willing to take participants on a Tuesday at 11 a.m., you might still want to say, but you have to have signed up by Monday at 10 p.m. because I'm going to go to bed and I don't have to come to campus the next day at 11 a.m. unless I have an appointment. Now, if you're going to be in the lab regardless of signups, this deadline can be very close to the time you're planning to conduct your research. But if you're not going to come in if no one has signed up, that deadline should be when you'd want to make a call as to, nope, never mind, I'm not coming in. So perhaps like the night before or something like that. That's really just practical for you so that you aren't having to scramble when someone signs up 5 minutes before an appointment time and you're still, in your dorm room or you're in your apartment and you can't even get to campus on time. Bring a list of all registered participants every day to your session so you can easily mark off if people showed up for their appointments and should be assigned credit, or if they didn't show up and should be assigned no-show credit in Sona. And definitely update that Sona system regularly because it's your job to award them credit in Sona if they've participated in your study. Before any participant leaves a lab, if you're doing lab data collection, you need to make sure you know their name as it appears in Sona. Some professors who give course credit or extra credit want to rely fully on Sona to award credit. So psych students in a class that takes credit should already be in the Sona system. But not everybody does. If students are in another department, they likely don't use Sona. It's not that you can't, it's just that we, the psych department, pay for Sona and most people on campus don't. So if you're in another department, you probably have to get credit in some other way. Like I said, one option is to use their debriefing form, which would show that they were in a study. Make it clear you do not know which classes outside the psychology department, if any, are giving assignment credit or extra credit for research participation, but they should hang on to that debriefing form in case. You also should know whether they were scheduled or if they're a walk-in, because if they were a scheduled participant, you can really easily hop into Sona and assign them credit for participating. They're already in there. But if they were a walk-in, you'll need to add them into Sona as a participant in a previous session and also assign them credit for participating. Go to your Sona guide for many more details on how you do that. I just want to remind you, you need to do it. If someone signed up to participate but did not show, you need to mark in Sona that they did not participate. Don't just blindly assign points to every name. That's why you want to keep track of who was showing up, who was here, who had an appointment, who was a drop-in. Okay, now let's shift gears to people who are doing online data collection, like having an online survey or something like that. I would still recommend asking faculty if you can recruit in their classroom. It can be just the first 2 to 3 minutes of class describing the basics of your study and asking them to go into Sona to sign up. Of course, you'd have to ask that faculty member, hey, are your students already in Sona? They will know, by the way, because we get asked every semester if we're in the psych department, do you want your classes in the Sona system or not? It's a good idea to go in and recruit. It points out that this counts towards a required assignment. Some people who teach general psych require research participation. It also, you can point out if it's eligible for extra credit for that class, like clarification from the instructor what they're doing. It's a good idea. Some people bring a small handout with their name, their study title in Sona, and or a link or a QR code to get them to sign in. People might be more likely to do your study than somebody else's. Assigning credit in Sona, if it's an online study, very clear, you go into your study, whatever it is, view your uncredited time slots, mark all as participated. With online studies, their info only shows up if they've already clicked into your study. You don't have to worry about excused or unexcused no-shows, which is nice. And again, that Sona guide has more details on how you do this. I'd recommend doing this about once a week or so, because those students are going to want to know their extra credit is, pretty well up to date when they're trying to decide, should I participate in more research? Check to make sure your project is inactive in Sona once you want to be done collecting data, and do one final check that all participants have gotten credit. Do not just let it go, because some students will try and participate after you've stopped checking in anymore. That's really unfair if they're not getting credit for it then. So as soon as you know you're done collecting data, shut down the study in Sona. For classroom data collection, you also can assign points through Sona. So you go in and create a new time slot in the past after you've collected the data in the classroom and enroll all participants who were in the class. You notice you need to keep a list of any names for all the people who were in the study. That's usually not too bad. You have their consent forms. Make sure that you keep all consent forms for a particular class, day, time, and professor, maybe in a marked folder or a manila envelope until you've done this step. Because you're going to have to go into Sona and say, okay, who are the 20 people who were in Casey Cole's 10 o'clock stats class? Make sure you go into Sona, create this time slot in the past, enter all of them in as participants, everybody who was in the class, based on the names that are on, say, that consent form, and then give them all credit. I'd recommend doing this after each class session on that same day so you don't forget, you don't lose track of anything. Also, keep a list of any names that you are seeing on a consent form that don't seem to show up in Sona and give that to the instructor. Typically what's happening is somebody has written down a name that is like a nickname, or their handwriting is bad, you can't read it. The instructor then could either tell you, oh, right, this name is supposed to say John Smith, in which case go in and give them credit. Or maybe for some reason that person just never signed up for SONA, which is weird, but sometimes it happens, and the instructor can kind of decide where to go from there. Lab studies, same thing. You go into SONA and you review your time slots for the day. I would do this every single day. You can pull up SONA on a lab computer as long as you have your username and password, or if you bring your laptop, and just do it while the participants are sitting in the lab. Okay, for experimental, not so much for senior thesis, it's important that everybody needs to periodically go into SONA and provide credit for the participants. That's important because once you hit senior thesis, y'all have to do this for your own individual studies. So best to be trying it out while you're in experimental so you're sure you kind of understand what you're doing. Spreading the workload, again, in senior thesis, your whole project is on you, so there's no workload to be spread. But a reason to make sure you spread the workload in experimental is because you're going to have to be able to do it. Everyone needs to collect data if you're working as part of a research group, and it should be a relatively even spread of work across your group. Under no circumstances, by the way, should anyone miss a data collection appointment. If something arises, so for example, if you are going to be going into a classroom to collect your data, you need to be there. If you're doing a lab data collection, you need to be there. If something arises, be in contact with your group if you're in experimental and if someone else replace you. If no one else can fill in, either because your research group in experimental, no one's available, or if you're in senior thesis, it's just you. Maybe you have an illness or something like that. If no one can fill in, you need to contact your participants in advance and alert them if they were coming in for a lab appointment to reschedule. If you are going into a classroom, you need to contact that instructor as soon as you possibly can. And I would propose coming up with a backup plan, meaning, I'm so sorry, I'm ill, I'm not going to be able to come in today or tomorrow. I would be available to reschedule the next 2 class periods you have if it would work with you. If not, I totally understand. And again, I'm very sorry that this happened, right? Show up to appointments prepared. Be there a few minutes early and ready to go for all appointments. If you are going to a classroom, make sure you have all of your materials and they're organized in a way that you can very easily and clearly hand out your consent forms, collect them, hand out your research materials, or start a video or an audio or whatever needs to be done, that everything is ready to go. And ideally, if you're using any AV equipment, that you've tested it in that room so you know how to turn up the volume if necessary, where to plug in a jump drive if that's needed, quickest way to get into the cloud to be able to show a video, all that sort of thing. Do not take longer in that classroom or in an in-person lab appointment than you said it would take. If you say this will take a maximum of 15 minutes, it absolutely should not take longer. That might mean saying to a straggler student that they can't participate in the classroom setting if they come in late. Look to that professor for guidance. If someone's coming in 30 seconds late, I think you can probably accommodate them. But if they're coming in 3, 4, 5 minutes late, that could mean that the whole room is taking longer than you said. In that case, maybe you need to tell that person, sorry, we're in the middle of an experiment or we're in the middle of research. As soon as it's over, we'll let you know. Something like that. Like I said, don't miss an appointment. Apologize profusely if you just can't make something work. And alert professor and our participants immediately and ask what you could do to make it right. Most people are understanding, right? Things happen. Cars get flat tires, people get sick, but you want to make sure that you are getting in touch with them as soon as possible. And make sure all participants are getting the credit that they have been promised. Double, triple, quadruple check that you are getting credit assigned to everyone who's earned it. Typically, this means going into SONA, checking a lot, but it also would mean if you're going into a classroom, if an instructor says, hey, can you just pull together a list of everyone who participated? I keep track of my extra credit myself, or something like that. Make sure that you've brought paper and a pencil or pen. Ask them, would you like a hard copy? Would you like me to email you? If they ask for it in email, make sure that you double check that you sent that email, that everyone is getting the credit that they were promised. This is a whole lot of details of how to do these experiments. So make sure you're taking your time to get through all of these details and review any of this, review that SONA handout, to make sure everyone's kind of getting what they need out of this process.